of World War I. During World War I, the soldiers in the trenches used a wide variety of weapons, which included rifles, machine guns, artillery, airplanes, cavalry, or horses, flamethrowers, mustard and chlorine gases, submarines, tanks, and dreadnoughts, which are boats. First weapon we'll look at is artillery, which is shells and bombs. Artillery is the word used to describe large caliber mounted field guns. The caliber is the diameter of the barrel. The picture here is showing an example of heavy artillery that was used in the trenches. Because World War I was mostly a stalemate war, it meant that long-range weapons that could deliver devastating blows to the enemy were necessary. Unfortunately, artillery would typically need crews of up to 12 men to work them, and sometimes the shells would actually be as heavy as 900 pounds. So artillery is good for launching into the enemy trench with no risk to the self. Next, we're going to look at chlorine and mustard gas, the two types of biological weapons that were used in World War I. Chlorine gas was the first one to be used, and it was used by the Germans for the first time in 1915 in the Battle of Ypres. French soldiers had never come across this type of weapon before and assumed it was just a typical smokescreen. It had a distinctive smell, which was a mixture of pineapple and pepper, and they only realized they were being gassed when they started to have chest pains and a burning sensation in their throats. Death with this type of weapon is very painful, and typically you would suffocate. The other thing about chlorine gas, it is deadly, but it's dependent on wind direction. So if you had the wind shift and it would blow in the opposite direction, you actually would kill your own soldiers instead of the enemy. The second type of biological weapon that was used in World War I is mustard gas. It is the most deadly biological weapon of World War I, and it was odorless, took 12 hours to take effect, was very powerful. Only small amounts were needed to be added to shells to be effective, and it remained active for several weeks when it landed in the soil. The nastiest thing about mustard gas is that it made the skin blister, the eyes sore, and the victim would start to vomit. It would cause internal and external bleeding and would target the lungs. In some cases, it could take up to 5 weeks to die, so that would be one of the most painful ways that you could die. What's also interesting is before gas masks were invented, which are shown in the picture here, they didn't know, how they would take care of gas attacks. So what they found out with chlorine gas is they could actually pee on a cloth, and that would actually avoid them from suffocating and from dying from the attack. The next weapon, I don't know if we can call it a weapon, but it's cavalry, or the horses. They were actually quite useless in World War I, mostly because the horses' feet would get stuck in the mud in the trenches, and they wouldn't be able to actually go across no man's land. What's interesting, though, is that the Germans had such sophisticated systems that they actually created trenches that had stables to house all the horses in. The next weapon's my favorite weapon of World War I. That's the airplane. Airplanes were originally used as reconnaissance or spying or information gathering, and basically they started to realize that the plane could be used for way more than just spying on the other side. By the middle of the war, they realized, hey, maybe we could inflict some damage. So what they did is they actually brought bricks on board their planes and would drop them off the side in hopes that they would hit someone or inflict some sort of damage. Near the end of the war, they finally realized maybe we could inflict more damage. So they actually decided to mount rifles on their airplanes. Unfortunately, World War I aircraft had propellers, and those propellers actually would get shot off by the machine gun until the Germans created a timing device that allowed them to continue and survive. A war ace is someone who has shot down more than 5 planes. This is Canada's #1 fighting ace. This is Billy Bishop. He's from Owen Sound, Ontario. He shot down 72 planes. And this here is the Red Baron, also known as Manfred von Richthofen. He is Germany's #1 fighting ace who actually shot down 80 planes. The Red Baron himself was shot down actually by a Canadian whose name is Arthur Roy Brown. So what we'll do is we'll continue on the weapons of World War I in the next section.